Chapter 31. Potion. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 31. Potion Translator. Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios. Dunn Smith stared at Klein with his gray eyes for a full minute without a word. Klein did not cower under the pressure of the silence and his gaze. He continued, locking his eyes with Dunn. You must understand that once you consume the potion, there will be no room for regret. Finally, Dunn spoke again in a deep, emotionless voice. Klein grinned and said, I know, but I respect the voice in me. First, Sleepless does not meet my requirements. It was the same for Spectator, which he heard from the Tarot Club based on description. He was unsure when he would come into contact with other Beyonder pathways. A slow remedy could not work for an urgent situation, therefore, there was no need for him to wait. By the same logic, Corpse Collector was eliminated as well, leaving the two choices, Mystery Prior and Seer. Under the premise that potions of the same sequence were equally dangerous and him unable to obtain more information, as well as the fact that both Mystery Prior and Seer met his requirements, then regardless of whether Emperor Roselle was making a passing remark or if he really regretted not choosing Apprentice, Marauder, and Seer, it was enough to tip the balance in his heart. Furthermore, he could tell from the diary that as long as he figured out the true essence of digestion and acting, he would be able to avoid the negative effects the potion would bring to a significant extent. As for the murmurings and illusory enticements that could drive people to corruption and madness, he had already encountered that even without being a Beyonder. All right. Dunn stood up and picked up his half-top hat. As he put it on, he said, Follow me down. Klein nodded and gave a gentleman's bow in gratitude. Tap. 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 Both of them ventured down, their footsteps echoing through the silent and vast stairwell and passageway. Klein suddenly felt gripped by anxiety as he tried to find a topic of conversation. Captain, you mentioned that taking the potion would not directly give me the corresponding knowledge on mysticism, that I'll only have the qualifications to learn it. Then, where does the basic knowledge of mysticism come from? Did our predecessors risk their life for it or obtain it via other means? Every time he went underground, he would find the air especially fresh. Clearly, the ventilation was excellent. However, the occasional gust of wind made one shiver. Dunn glanced at him, the darkness in his gray eyes appearing abnormally deep. He answered calmly, one of them is, as you said, experimentation, summarization, and enhancement. Second, being bestowed by the gods. Third, the dangerous murmurs that others can't hear do not only growl and roar senselessly. At times, they will describe some matters regarding mysticism. But according to what I know, people who truly listen to the murmurs on a long-term basis have gone mad without exception. Or they would fall to corruption and become monsters. Of course, we must thank them. The notebooks they've left behind are precious treasures in the field of mysticism. Human lab rats. The underground passage's cold humidity made Klein shudder suddenly. Then, would my luck enhancement ritual, which turned into social network magic, eventually lead to similar effects due to the crazy and horrible murmurs? At the intersection, Dunn did not proceed toward Cheney's Gate, nor did he turn to the weapons, materials and archives. Instead, he took Klein to the left and approached St. Selena Cathedral. Midway, he stopped. It was unclear what he touched to open a secret door. This is our Nighthawk team's alchemy room. I will get old Neil to retrieve the Seer potion formula and the corresponding materials from inside Cheney's Gate. You have pretty good luck. The goddess has blessed you with her favor. We should still have the materials needed for 2 Seer potions. If not, you would have to wait a long while. Dunn pointed at the room behind the door. Wait in here. Later, watch old Neil concoct the potion. It's the most basic part of mysticism studies. Oh, do not randomly touch things in there. They are either very dangerous, expensive, or both. With that said, Dunn added like before. Oh right, I forgot something again. Your becoming a Beyonder is a result of you having to face danger and the need to find the notebook. The meritorious deed was only a part of it, therefore, you will not be a member of our team for the time being. You will still be a civilian staff member with a corresponding salary. You will still do what I instructed you to do previously. One additional thing is to learn more about mysticism with old Neil. You can arrange the time with him. All right. Other than feeling a little disgruntled by the lack of a pay rise, Klein was in full agreement with the rest. According to Dunn, there was still the process of learning and grasping one's newfound powers after consuming the potion. If he were to become a formal member immediately and participate in paranormal missions, his death was certain. Dunn turned around and walked 2 steps towards the intersection when he suddenly turned back. Another thing. I knew it. Klein was already used to the style of his captain. We got something out of the Secret Order's actions, said Dunn with his usual expression. It's unlikely they will provoke you in the near future, but don't be careless. It has to do with them being temporarily unable to confirm whether the Antigonus family's notebook is important to them. From what we discovered, they have preserved some of the ancient customs and we can confirm that they are related to the Solomon Empire and the corrupted nobles of that period. Got it. Thanks, Captain, said Klein as he exhaled. This was also one of the reasons why he did not wish to wait, grasping the chance of becoming a Beyonder in such a hurry. As he watched Dunn leave and confirmed that he would not turn his head to say more, Klein slowly walked into the alchemy room. The room had long tables. There were test tubes, pipettes, scales and crucibles. It resembled a chemistry laboratory from his previous life. It was just more Spartan and ancient. Other than that, there was a huge cauldron, a dark wood ladle, a translucent crystal ball, and other items. The dark sacred emblem and other strange emblems were visible everywhere. They gave the room a tint of mystery. Klein looked around with interest, but he was not stupid enough to touch the things. After a while, he heard footsteps. Old Neil carried a tiny silver chest with complicated patterns. He was still wearing his unique classic black robe that seemed anachronistic, matched with a felt hat with a rounded edge of the same color. Lad, I never expected you to choose Seer. Old Neil put down the chest and used his somewhat turbid red eyes size up Klein. Your personality is just like mine when I was young. You just don't want to follow the masses. Not bad. Light these few gas lamps and close the door. All right. Klein tried hard not to tremble as he lit each gas lamp in the alchemy room. He made dim light rule over the place once again. Tack. 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 The secret door was closed. He turned back to see the white-haired and deep-wrinkled old Neil using a bunch of strange tied tree branches to scrub the black cauldron. The concoction of a sequence potion is extremely simple, at least for sequence 7 and below. There's no need for a special flame or any additional ritual, much less an incantation. There's no need for one to participate in it spiritually. All one needs to do is go according to the formula's steps, add the precise amounts, and mix it. That will be all. Old Neil's wrinkles seemed to bloom from his smile. For real? Klein questioned in surprise. This sounds as simple as my luck enhancement ritual. Man, it's quite frightening when you come to think of it. Perhaps it's a gift of the gods. Praise the lady. Old Neil drew a haphazard circle over his chest. Following that, he opened the silver chest and pulled out goatskin parchment that exuded antiquity. The yellowish-brown goatskin unfurled inch by inch, revealing words on it. Klein looked from a distance and realized it was in Hermes, a language he was very familiar with. It was written in ink that resembled blood, seeming to still having its fluidity intact. But other than that, it did not seem extraordinary in any way. Seer. 100 milliliters of pure water, 13 drops of night vanilla liquids, 7 gold mint leaves. Klein silently recited the formula's content, but the rest of it was blocked by old Neil's wrist, preventing him from reading it. Pure water is water that is repeatedly distilled. Thankfully, I made some previously, so there's no need to waste time on it. While old Neil gave the introduction, he took a large sealed glass bottle from the table with great familiarity. He took off the stopper and poured about 100 milliliters of pure water into the cauldron without much thought. Klein did not dare ask, afraid he would affect old Neil's concoction. After all, he was the one drinking the potion. 13 drops of night vanilla juices. This can be extracted and stored as an essential oil ahead of time. Old Neil took out a tiny brown bottle from the silver chest and with a pipette and dripped 13 drops into the cauldron in a relaxed manner. A faint but easing fragrance emanated, making Klein feel an abnormal sense of peace. 7 gold mint leaves. Old Neil picked up a silver-patterned can and removed its lid. With his bare hands, he picked up a few leaves and scattered it into the cauldron. He caught a whiff of a fresh and stimulating scent. 4, 5, 6, 7. Perfect. Old Neil chuckled and looked at the potion formula on the goatskin. 3 drops of poison hemlock. This isn't something you should drink randomly. It can cause your entire body to numb to the point of death. In ancient times, it proved to be the best option for committing suicide. It's not like I'm silly. Klein lampooned. Old Neil changed pipettes and dripped the poison hemlock into the cauldron. The mixture caused a strange smell that freshened one's mind. 9 grams of dragon blood grass powder. Old Neil took his time to reach his hand into the silver chest and pulled out a transparent test tube. There was some deep black powder inside. He used a beaker and a scale to measure 9 grams of powder and poured it into the cauldron. He then stirred the mixture twice with the dark wood ladle. The laid-back process to making the concoction made Klein a little worried. In fact, the materials from before were just supplemental. The exact amount doesn't really affect the final outcome. Should I put a little bit more? Old Neil made a joke. The last 2 is what's crucial. The amount can be slightly lowered, but it cannot be too far from the requirement, or your enhancement can fail. Oh, the quantity cannot be any more, even just by a bit. If so, you will have to be treated for mental problems. It's not impossible to die immediately. Klein immediately tensed up as he saw old Neil pull out a black glass bottle from the silver chest. Lavos squid's blood, 10 milliliters. This kind of squid is considered an extraordinary biological species. It is clearly mutated. It is covered in mystery. Its blood will rapidly break down under sunlight and lose its unique qualities. It has to be stored in opaque material. Old Neil's tone no longer sounded relaxed. He quickly and carefully retrieved 10 milliliters of blood with a test tube. The blood was blue like the sky. From time to time, it produced illusory bubbles as though it was connected to the spiritual world. After pouring the blood inside the test tube, the remaining drops are ignored as a form of precaution, whispered old Neil. The moment the blue blood entered the cauldron and made contact with the liquid from before, it produced bubbling sounds. The surrounding light was dyed with a light blue tinge, making Klein feel a strange sense of distance but also familiarity. It felt like the feeling of being in a mother's womb. It elevated a human soul. The final item. Stellar aqua crystal. 50 grams. Old Neil's voice sounded in Klein's ears, jolting him awake as he looked at the table. In the old gentleman's hand was a piece of extremely pure crystal. Furthermore, the crystal appeared gelatinous, as though it was jelly from earth. It lacked hardness. Under the blue light's illumination, it reflected bits of light as it seemed to contain a resplendent void of stars within. This is excellent material for the creation of divination crystals. Just a little less in consideration of any mistakes. As old Neil measured, he used a tiny patterned silver blade to extract the crystal. Pure water, night vanilla, gold mint leaves, poison hemlock juice, dragon blood grass, Lavos squid blood, and stellar aqua crystal make up a seer. At that moment, Klein could not help but recall the formula. With everything done, old Neil poured in a few blocks of stellar aqua crystal into the cauldron. Sizzle. Illusory fog instantly spewed forth, turning the alchemy room into a blur. Klein seemed to see a vast array of stars amid the fog and felt like he was being observed by an invisible existence. A few seconds later, the fog dissipated. Old Neil used the darkwood ladle and scooped out some sticky dark blue liquid. It had strange characteristics, gooey and inseparable. Not one bit was left in the black cauldron. The dark blue liquid was poured into an opaque cup before old Neil pointed at it. It's done, your seer potion. Chapter 32. Spirit Vision. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 32. Spirit Vision Translator. Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios. Klein looked at dark blue gelatinous liquid, finding it hard to describe it as either a block or cup of liquid. He swallowed his saliva and said in great difficulty, "Am I to drink it just like that? Is there no need for any other preparations? Like a ritual, an incantation, or a prayer?" Old Neil acknowledged tersely before saying, "Preparation. There is. Get a cup of Intis Ormer grape wine, suck on a Desi cigar, then whistle a relaxing tune, and dance a upbeat court dance. You can do a tap dance if you prefer that. Finally, play a round of Gwent cards." When he saw Klein's expression turn dumbfounded, old Neil laughed and summarized what he had just said. "If you feel nervous. You are quite humorous, aren't you?" The corners of Klein's mouth twitched as he resisted the urge to draw his gun. He put his cane down and extended his right hand. As though he held something heavy, he raised the opaque cup. The smell of the potion was faint and seemingly ethereal. "Lad, do not hesitate. The more you hesitate, the more nervous and afraid you will be. That will only affect the absorption that follows," said old Neil with his back facing Klein. It was as though he had said it casually. It was unknown when he arrived by the nearby water basin. He turned on the tap and washed his hands. Klein nodded silently and took a deep breath. Just like he was back when he was a child, he pinched his nose and drank it like medicine. He moved the opaque cup to his mouth and tipped his head, drinking it down with a gulp. A cool and smooth feeling quickly filled his oral cavity. It then flowed through his gullet and into his stomach. The sticky, dark blue liquid seemed to grow out thin and long tentacles, bringing stimulation and coldness to every cell in Klein's body. He could not help but convulse as his vision rapidly went into a blur. All colors seemed to saturate. The reds were redder, the blues were bluer, and the blacks were blacker. The rich colors blended like an impressionist painting. Klein had seen such a scene before. It was back when he was questioned by the spirit medium, daily. At that moment, his vision became a blur, and although his mind felt light, it was clear. He felt like a castaway floating in the sea. Slowly, his surroundings turned discernible. All the colors returned to their original as a grayish and blurry fog emanated. Around him were bodies he found difficult to describe. There were transparent objects that did not seem to exist. Deep down, there were clean light clusters of different colors. The light seemed to possess life or contain immense knowledge. This is a little similar to what I saw during the luck enhancement ritual. As Klein instinctively looked down, he realized that he was still standing in his original spot, body convulsing. Suddenly, he came to a realization, causing his consciousness to sink abruptly and fuse with him. Boom! The fog quickly dissipated as the colors restored to normal. The bright, clear halo and the inexistent objects instantly vanished. The scene in the alchemy room returned to normal, but Klein felt his head swell. He felt like it was being yanked apart. Whatever he saw had countless afterimages. His ears were overwhelmed by an ethereal murmur. Hornaces. Phlegria. Hornaces. Phlegria. Hornaces. Phlegria. Klein felt a stabbing pain at his forehead as he quickly had thoughts of causing destruction to vent the discomfort in him. He frowned and hurriedly shook his head. Is your vision abnormal? Are you also hearing things you did not use to hear, said old Neil, at his side with a concealed smile. Yes, Mr. Neil, what should I do? Klein tolerated the intense mania and asked. Old Neil chuckled. This is the resulting seepage of the potion's energy. You lack the means to control it. Alright, do as I say. Think of an object in your mind, something common. Make it simple and easy. Klein quickly focused as he envisaged his own half-top hat woven from black silk. He recalled the feeling when he touched it and its exact shape. Place all your focus on it. Keep repeating that while creating the outlines. Does it feel a little better? Old Neil's voice penetrated into his mind like a serene song. Klein turned his focus bit by bit to the imagined top hat. He felt the murmurs subside into a whisper before they vanished. The afterimages he saw also stacked upon one another and no longer appeared a blur. Much better, said Klein after calming his mind of chaotic emotions and having exhaled. He looked down at his body and discovered that nothing abnormal had happened. He moved his limbs and with half-anticipation and half-doubt, asking, I succeeded. I'm now considered a seer. Old Neil pulled out a mirror-like mercury plate and shoved it in front of him. Look at your eyes. Klein focused his gaze and saw that he was wearing a black top hat. His outline stood out and his facial features looked normal. Apart from having his face covered in sweat, he did not seem different in any way. He followed old Neil's instruction and carefully looked at his eyes. Only then did he discover that his brown eyes had deepened quite significantly. It was so much deepened that it was like the night, one in complete darkness. It felt so deep that it could absorb the souls of others. Normally, dark brown pupils are easily recognized as black. Without looking very carefully, even Klein himself would not have noticed. This is a physical manifestation of the potion's powers. When you learn cogitation and how to converge your power, your eyes will return to normal. Old Neil smiled as he reached out his right hand. Congratulations, our new Beyonder, our seer. Thank you. Klein reached out his hand and shook it. Mr. Neil, when can I learn how to cogitate? You can learn it now. The initial steps of cogitation is relatively simple. It's even more so for Beyonders, said old Neil with a smile. Just now, producing an object in your mind to divert your attention and turning the energy seepage inwards is actually the first step to cogitation. Try doing it again. Klein closed his eyes and once again, his mind depicted the half-top hat. His concentration seemed to be more easily focused than before. Soon, random thoughts that surfaced would quickly vanish, leaving the hat's outline. Let your brain go somewhat blank. Exchange the object you imagined. Use something that does not exist in this world, an object you imagine completely out of thin air. You have to follow this rule. Only by doing so can you enter cogitation, only then can you exceed the concept of I. The limitless I will become one with the universe, giving you the ability to see and understand the truth. You will obtain knowledge only you yourself can understand. In the domain of mysticism studies, it's called a mystic experience, said old Neil using a pacifying tone. You just need to listen to the descriptions that I'll get to later. What's most important is to enter cogitation. Something that doesn't exist in this world. Imagine something completely out of thin air. Would things from Earth count? Klein attempted using an earthy-green intercontinental missile he saw on television. He replaced the half-top hat with this long and thick missile. However, regardless of how he outlined it or imagined it, he ultimately only ended up focusing his attention. It doesn't seem like it will work. Klein had no choice but to let his imagination run wild. He outlined a sphere of light and then many similar objects, gathering them together. The spheres of light stacked upon one another. It felt like an object of fantasy. Klein's thoughts gradually turned ethereal and afloat. His body and mind calmed down. The objects that did not seem to exist, the fog with the bright clusters of light, and the complex colors appeared once again. They floated in the sky in close reach. He extended his spirituality inch by inch as he looked down at them quietly. He sensed it and took it in. Very good. As expected of a seer. You entered cogitation very smoothly. You are just slightly worse than me back then. Slightly, said old Neil with a chuckle. In that case, I'll begin teaching you the most common, easiest to grasp, and most useful ability in the future in mysticism. Spirit vision. He switched off the gas lamps one after another but opened the door to the alchemy room. It made the spot where Klein was dark, but not to the point of failing to make out silhouettes of objects. All right. In your present state, raise your hands and place them in front of your eyes. Your index fingers need to face each other, but they are not to touch. Open your eyes and keep them open until you are accustomed to the darkness. Klein completed each step according to old Neil's description. He saw the silhouettes of his fingers and the surrounding objects. Actually, you should be lying down to let your body be entirely relaxed. But since the effect of your cogitation is not bad, let's continue. Old Neil laughed. Focus your gaze on a spot behind your hands. It has to be behind. Then, slowly move your fingers and maintain the same pose without touching them. Also, do not pull them out of your sight. Klein calmly listened to it and cast his gaze at an empty spot behind his palms. He then slowly moved his index fingers within his vision. Once, twice, thrice. Suddenly, Klein saw a fiery red color in between his fingers. Eh. He let out a sound. You see color. That's right. That's the initial step to spirit vision. The color you see is your aura, said old Neil with a chuckle. No rush. Do it a few more times. After stabilizing it, look elsewhere. I'll also take this opportunity to explain to you the different meanings of the different colors. All right. Klein moved his fingers back and forth while having his vision trained on the fiery red. Old Neil thought for a moment before saying, to put it simply, the mainstream way of mysticism is to split non-physical parts of a human into 4 levels. At its core is the spirit body, which is also everyone's basic spirituality. There is a school of thought that believes all biological creatures have spirituality and have a spirit body. I'm not sure about anything else, but to mystery priors, the goal of cogitation and the method to increase our strength is directed toward the spirit body. Outside the spirit body is the astral projection. It is the means for the spirit body to communicate with the spirit world and with stellar space. It's considered an external manifestation of the spirit body. Besides, it will be directly related to your personal ambition and your prevailing emotions. The scenes you see after consuming the potion are scenes your astral projection sees when it wanders through the spirit world. That world does not obey the laws of the physical world. It involves exceeding the concept of I, the limitless I, and the universe's I. The past, present, and future might be stacked upon one another, and that is the source of divination. In the spirit world, what you see is just an imagery, a symbol. You have to interpret it to understand its actual meaning. Divination and many magic spells are cast through the astral projection. Do not mistake its relationship and differences with a spirit body. One is just a body and the other is for form. Klein continued looking at the aura in between his fingertips and made the simple conclusion. Further out will be the body of heart and mind. From this point forth, it will combine with the physical body. It involves your brain and is an overall manifestation of your inferential abilities, your analytical abilities, your observational abilities, and identification abilities. Some potions will mainly raise this. Quite a number of magic spells target it as well. Old Neil explained in relatively great detail, the outermost layer is the ether body. It is a manifestation of your vital energies and physical form. The aura color you see is an external phenomenon of your ether body. In other words, apart from the spiritual bodies, ghosts, and specters you can see directly with spirit vision, it might also include certain existences that should not be seen. You can also see the ether bodies of others or their auras. From their thickness, brightness, and color, you can determine their health and emotional state. When your spirit vision improves and you grasp more mysticism knowledge, you will be able to discover even more details. You can even determine the lifespan of others. By the way, the emotional state I mentioned would also manifest itself because of your astral projection. When you go higher in sequence, your spirit vision will reach a relatively high stage. You can even be able to see someone else's astral projection. That way, you will learn even more things. This is a level only seers and mystery priors can attain. Some fellows even claim that the strongest form of spirit vision allows one to see anything in any place, including the past and future. However, I'm skeptical about it. It sounds quite powerful. Klein was almost turning eager. Old Neil coughed and continued, let's return to the ether body and the colors of the auras. Your limbs and parts that are required in motion will appear red. Your head and brain surface will appear as purple. Spots that excrete waste will appear orange. The digestion system will appear as yellow. The heart and other regulatory systems will appear green. Your throat and other parts of the nervous system will appear blue. An entirely balanced body will make a body be cloaked in white. That is a symbol of health. Once it turns dark or the thickness thins, the color will change. That indicates that the corresponding spot has turned problematic. It means it's in a state of exhaustion or illness. In addition, the inner layer of the astral projection represents prevailing emotions. Red means passion and excitement. Orange means warmth and satisfaction. Yellow means happiness and extroversion. Green means calm and peace. Blue means coldness and stillness that one is in thought. White means brightness, an eagerness to improve. Dark colors mean worry, sorrow, and silence. Purple means that spirituality is taking control of the lead, coldness and estrangement. Klein silently memorized the information and stabilized his initial spirit vision. Good, you can look at other objects. Old Neil did not speak further as he nodded. Klein slowly turned his head and looked at Old Neil. Indeed, he saw different colors in different parts of his body. The aura was both thick and thin at different spots. The purple color at his head was brightest and his limbs' redness was relatively dark. The overall whiteness to his body was somewhat faded as well. Indeed, he's getting on in age. Klein made a silent comment to himself. Only with what he saw did he feel that he had become a beyonder. I am now a beyonder. He shifted his gaze and carefully sized up Old Neil when suddenly he saw a translucent pair of cold and ruthless eyes without any brows in the void behind him. This nearly illusory eyes were staring at Old Neil intently, as well as him. This. Klein shuddered as he gaped and said, "You have a pair of eyes behind you." Old Neil was taken aback before he forced a smile. Ignore them. Chapter 33. Switch. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 33. Switch Translator. Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios. The moment Old Neil finished his sentence, the illusory pair of eyes that lurked in the darkness behind him vanished. Even in his spirit vision state, Klein was no longer able to identify traces of its existence. This is a characteristic of ritualistic magic, explained Old Neil with a chuckle. Fascinating. Is spirit vision an enhanced version of yin-yang eyes? Klein felt like a child who had received a new toy. In excitement, he turned his gaze away and began observing every corner of the room. He wanted to see the differences of the alchemy room with and without the spirit vision. The outlines of the objects in the dark, such as the tables, test tubes, scales, cups, and cupboards, did not look different from how it looked like without spirit vision. They did not emit any lights or colors. Objects without lives do not have any spirituality. Klein mumbled to himself as he swept his gaze toward the silver chest. Suddenly, he saw a vibrancy of colors. The colors were as blue as the sky, as resplendent as the stars, or as crimson red as burning flames. Materials from extraordinary beings still have some life in them, and are still active. Even if the source is already dead. Klein deliberated on his words as he sought old Neil's help. A precise description is that they have remnant spiritualities. It is one of the crucial points of a successful potion concoction. It is also one of the reasons why a Beyonder will lose control. Dunn should have already informed you, explained old Neil frankly. He suddenly laughed, having recalled something. I remember that the formula of corpse collector requires a desiccated mature black-spotted frog. To consume that potion requires a lot of courage. Klein imagined a little and found it disgusting. He did not echo old Neil's words and turned his gaze to a dark area. However, there were no spiritual bodies or ghosts that he looked forward to seeing. Isn't it said that the world of spirits is everywhere? He asked out of curiosity. Old Neil chuckled tersely before saying, Punk, repeat after me. This is the headquarters of a Nighthawk squad. This is the ground beneath the church of the Evernight goddess. There are many Beyonders in here. Do you think we will allow spirits and souls to wander around in here? Furthermore, the spiritual world and spirit are two different concepts. Klein felt a little embarrassed as he turned his head, pretending to look at the faint light from the gas lamps at the entrance. I get it. While speaking, the area between his brows began to spasm. What's happening? Just as Klein turned around to ask, he suddenly saw a figure standing quietly by the door at the periphery of the light. It appeared human, though its aura's colors and the darkness blended perfectly, making it impossible to discern. Hiss. Klein felt a painful spasm at his glabella. His vision turned chaotic as he focused his attention again, but there was no formless figure. Strange. He turned around and asked. Mr. Neil, the spot in between my brows is a little painful from spasms. This is very common. You are a new Beyonder. Spirit vision places a great burden on your spirit body. Furthermore, it drains you constantly. Physical effects can be glabella spasms, headaches, oversensitivity, and minor bouts of hallucinations. And while viewing things with spirit vision, it's very easy to feel uncomfortable as a result of the unfamiliar surroundings. It's also very easy to have your emotions affected by others. These are things that require you to pay attention. You can become accustomed to and eliminate them with repeated practice. In addition, use it sparingly and end it in a timely fashion, answered old Neil with a smile. Why does it feel like you are delighted by this? Klein hurriedly asked for advice. Then, how do I exit from the state of having spirit vision? He had planned on mentioning the invisible figure he had seen, though when he heard of the minor bouts of hallucination among the symptoms, he struck that thought away. From the glabella spasm and headache, he could completely guess old Neil's answer. Like before, think of an item to divert your attention. It will bring you out of cogitation. Close your eyes and control your spirituality and repeatedly tell it to end. When you open your eyes again, you will discover that your spirit vision has ended. Old Neil described leisurely and when he was done, added, of course, that is the most trivial and clumsy method. We can repeatedly hint to ourselves in cogitation from practice to affect our spirituality. That way, you will have a simple switch. For instance, tapping at your glabella twice lightly would allow you easily activate spirit vision. Another 2 taps will simply end it. As for how you set it up, it depends on your habits and preferences. Got it. Klein thought for a moment and planned to imitate old Neil to use tapping his glabella twice as a switch for his spirit vision. Tapping once was easily mistaken as an instinctive knock to his head and tapping thrice could be a waste of valuable time in dangerous situations. As for actions like snapping fingers, they were too attention-drawing. He eased his focus and imagined the stacked spheres of light and re-entered a state of cogitation. Under old Neil's guidance, after repeated hints and practice, he finally set up his switch. He clenched his fist slightly and used his index finger's joint to tap at his glabella twice. Immediately, there were glowing auras of differing thickness and colors appearing before his eyes. After another 2 taps, everything returned to normal. "I've finally grasped it." He sighed with delight. Only then did he realize how exhausted he was, feeling like he could fall asleep at any time. His mind hurt as though he had stayed up for 3 nights. Old Neil said with a chuckle, "We are not sleepless. Every practice and every time spirit vision is used excessively, you will need some sleep. You can now go back and have a good rest. In the afternoon, go to Iron Cross Street where Welch's place is and walk around. Try your best to find clues about the Antigonus family's notebook as soon as possible. Tomorrow, I'll continue teaching you about mysticism. Of course, do not forget to read the historical documents." "All right." Klein was in full agreement with old Neil's arrangements. He picked up his cane and left the alchemy room. He watched the door close as old Neil returned to the armory. Klein massaged his glabella and temples and with the help of his cane, sauntered up the stairwell. At that moment, Dunn Smith came from behind him with the corners of his lips hooked. With a deep gaze, he said, "I heard from old Neil that you are a very suitable candidate. Even without cogitation, you were able to use spirit vision." "Perhaps, it's a unique trait of being a seer," replied Klein humbly. He guessed that Dunn had been watching the armory for old Neil. Dunn slowed down and went ahead of Klein a little. After a few seconds of silence, he turned around and said, "You have to remember that curiosity killed the cat. It can also kill Beyonders. Do not attempt to probe the murmurings you should not be listening or see existences you should not see." "All right." Klein knew this was another reminder of how Beyonders lost control. After entering Blackthorn Security Company, he greeted Roseanne, who obviously did not know that he had become a Beyonder. He slowly walked out the door and reached the streets where he took a trackless carriage to Daffodil Street. He nearly fell asleep on his return journey. It was still in the morning and the temperature was about 26 degrees Celsius. Klein pulled out a copper key from his waistband and opened the door to his home. There were still many items missing from his home. The living room and dining hall were still empty. Benson and Melissa had work or school, so they had both left early in the morning. Klein did not have the capacity to bother with anything else. He closed the door and briskly went to the 2nd floor and entered the bookshelf-equipped bedroom that belonged to him. After taking off his tuxedo and hanging it on a clothing rack, he eagerly plunged into bed. The moment his head hit the pillow, he fell asleep. Klein was awoken by bright sunlight. He turned his head and slowly opened his eyes to discover the burning sun outside. What time is it? Did I miss the tarot club in the afternoon? He struggled to get up and walked to the clothing rack to take out his pocket watch from the pocket of the tuxedo's inner lining. Not only had he forgotten about the matter, he had forgotten to close the door to his bedroom and pulled the curtains to the oriel window. Pa! Klein pulled out the pocket watch and immediately felt relieved when he opened it. It was only slightly past noon. There was still a lot of time until the scheduled gathering at 3 in the afternoon. It was Monday, the day he would have a gathering with the Hanged Man and Justice. Klein went into thought as he tapped his glabella twice. The scene before him changed once again as he saw that his body had restored to a bright luster. He tapped twice again and stopped his spirit vision. Relaxed, he went to the 1st floor and boiled a kettle of water. He placed some inferior quality tea leaves and chewed on some rye bread dabbed in a little butter. Afterwards, Klein flipped through historical materials and original Klein's diary. He began revising and consolidating his knowledge. At 2:57 p.m., Klein closed his book and capped his fountain pen before pulling the curtains. Immediately following that, he locked the bedroom's door, making the room turn abnormally dark. He tapped his glabella twice and activated spirit vision to survey his surroundings. After confirming that there were no invisible spiritual bodies in his room, Klein stopped the spirit vision and took out his pocket watch to check the time. Tick-tock, tick-tock. 1 minute before 3, he opened up his pace and like before, walked 4 steps in a counter-clockwise manner in a squarish shape. He incanted in Chinese softly. Only this time, he did not prepare any staple food. Klein closed his eyes as he felt the back of his hands turn itchy. It felt like the 4 black dots forming a square was protruding and projecting something. Hysterical shouts and alluring murmurs began resounding, but Klein realized that the headache was not as bad as the first time. It was not that he was unaffected, but that he was doing his best to stop himself from listening. As a beyonder, he had to have more self-control in such an environment. Soon, his body turned light as he floated up. He saw the grayish-white and blurry fog that emanated. Then, he saw dark red stars. 2 of them had a minuscule connection with him with an abnormal sense of familiarity. Klein looked at his blurry self and muttered in confusion, the astral projection that old Neil mentioned. He remained calm for a few seconds and again transformed the opulent divine palace with the tall bronze table under the domed ceiling, as well as the 20.2 high back chairs that corresponded to the different constellations. Klein calmly walked to the seat of honor and made his body and face be immersed in thicker gray fog. He extended his right hand and tapped 2 familiar deep red stars and created a miraculous connection. Chapter 34. Advance payment. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 34. Advance payment. Translator. Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios. In an underground basement without any windows, the burly Alger Wilson sat by a long table with various apparatuses and goatskin parchments on it. In front of him was a half-consumed candle. The dim, yellowish flames flickering made the shadows of the objects and table move like a mirage. Alger's hair was disheveled like seaweed with a deep blue color that resembled black. He wore a robe with lightning patterns embroidered on it. He clasped his hands with his thumbs facing each other while he focused on a bottle of black liquid to the left of the candle. Whoosh! 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 Splash! 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 The sound of tempestuous winds or the crashing of the sea waves howled from inside the sealed bottle. And in spots where the black ink did not sink, a faint fog would swirl. It was as though it grew eyes and a mouth. Alger cocked his head to glance at the clock hanging on the wall and watched the needle strike 3. He pressed down on his temple as his eyes turned dark. Fascinating colors surfaced from the various items on the table. At that moment, he discovered a deep red light appear like a tidal wave from nowhere, drowning him instantly. Backlund, Empress Borough, inside the Hall family's luxurious mansion. After dismissing her dance teacher, Audrey locked the door and sat straight up in front of her dressing table. The sun outside was bright and gorgeous. There was a light brown notebook made of exquisite goat skin. It was flipped open to reveal that it was blank. To its right was a fountain pen with a golden tip and embedded rubies. Audrey did a test and made sure that she could pick up the fountain pen and write down the formula the moment she left the gathering. "I'm so looking forward to it." She inhaled to repress her excited emotions as she looked at the mirror with puckered lips. However, she did not see it reflect herself. Instead, a dark red and illusory beam burst out from her body. Above the gray fog stood a majestic divine hall that looked like a giant's residence. Dark red colors bloomed on both sides of the bronze table. They surged upwards like a fountain before pattering down. It carved 2 blurry figures who sat in the same spots as before. Audrey, with her soft blonde hair and tall, slim build, instinctively looked towards the seat of honor. She saw the figure immersed in thick gray fog sitting back. One hand was flat, touching the table's side while the other hand was stroking his chin. "Good afternoon, Mr. Fool." Audrey shouted with a cheery voice. Following that, she turned her head and looked at the person opposite her. With the same tone, she said, "Good afternoon, Mr. Hanged Man. This lady sure is unsophisticated. Is she so sure that I'm a good person? Why isn't there any fear from her? Is she a noble lady who has been protected well?" Klein smiled and maintained his unfathomable image. "Good afternoon, Miss Justice." As he spoke, he lowered his head slightly and moved his left hand and tapped his glabella twice. What he saw changed instantly. He saw Justice and the Hanged Man emit the colors of their aura. And the surrounding gray fog and dark red stars remained the same. Nothing that seemingly did not exist or lustrous brilliances that possessed life was seen. He shifted his gaze and saw that Justice's aura perfectly matched the colors old Neil described. What was supposed to be red, purple, blue, or white were their respective colors. Furthermore, they maintained a lustrous brilliance and were of appropriate thickness. It was easy to tell that she was a vibrant young girl. The colors of her emotions are red and yellow. That's joy, zeal, and excitement. Klein made a judgment before casting his attention towards the Hanged Man. Like Justice, there was nothing special about the colors of the Hanged Man's aura. His emotions were blue mixed in with some orange. Calm, thoughtful, careful, and a little pleased. With this being his first attempt, Klein made a conclusion without much confidence. Just as he shifted his gaze away, he suddenly realized something strange. The aura of the Hanged Man's innermost layer was nearly of the same color. Klein focused his mind and took another careful look. He could faintly see that deep within the Hanged Man's ether body was a deep blue, akin to the sea. It felt like a tidal storm. His astral projection. Or should I say the surface of his astral projection. From the looks of it, he's really a beyonder, and one that's apparently stronger than old Neil. Klein analyzed as his mind was filled with questions. Not necessary. It might have to do with this being a unique environment. It's only because this is my home ground that I'm able to see these things that old Neil did not manifest. He turned his head toward Justice again and confirmed that it was a characteristic only beyonders possessed. At that moment, Alger also completed his greetings. Audrey drew a light gasp as she asked in anticipation, "Mr. Hanged Man, did you receive the box of ghost shark blood?" Alger took a look at Klein and saw him tapping his glabella as though he was considering other matters. "Thank you very much. It perfectly met my expectations. I never expected you to send it to me so quickly." "The ghost shark blood is not the typical extraordinary creature," said Alger frankly. Audrey smiled humbly and said, "I'm very happy to see this outcome." As she loved anything to do with mystery from a young age, she had befriended those in aristocratic circles with similar interests. They have exchanged information, books, and rare artifacts among each other. But before this, none of them had ever obtained any supernatural power to become a real beyonder. Instead, there were a few princes that hinted that they could gift them what they wanted if they became their princess consort. However, she had obtained the ghost shark blood directly from her family's vault. After all, the inventory only states one big bottle, without mentioning how many milliliters or how full it had to be. She believed that pouring a little bit of it would go unnoticed. Even if there was an accident and the matter was exposed, her parents were unlikely to pursue the matter. Alger looked deeply at the fool who was enveloped in fog before turning his head back with a smile. "According to our agreement, I will tell you the formula to the potion, spectator. Let me prepare myself." "All right, begin." Audrey inhaled as she focused her full attention. Low sequence potions are very easy to concoct. Just follow the order that I provide you. Do remember that there can be smaller quantities of the ingredients but not more. It would cause major problems. You should have heard about news of beyonders losing control. I believe there's no need for me to repeat it. Alger first mentioned things to take note of. Audrey nodded gently and said, "I understand completely." While she spoke, she turned her head to look at Mr. Fool. She wished to know if the mystery expert had anything to add. Unfortunately, the fool was sitting silently there like a statue. Alger thought for a moment before saying, having smaller quantities does not mean it should deviate by too much. If you do not have an assistant, I suggest you spend some time familiarizing yourself with chemistry experiment. I have a family tutor for such matters, answered Audrey without feeling the burden. After Alger mentioned the furthest extent of the deviation, he recited with great fluency, Spectator. Sequence 9 Potion. 80 milliliters of pure water. 5 drops of autumn crocus essence. 13 grams of cow teeth pianol powder. 7 petals of elf flowers. A matured manhal fish's eyeball. Add 35 milliliters of goat-horned black fish blood. The final 2 items are the main ingredients. They are extraordinary creatures from the sea. You have to be careful. All right. Audrey recalled and repeated, 80 milliliters of pure water. 5 drops of autumn crocus essence, 13 grams of cow teeth. Pianol powder, reminded Alger. With his help, Audrey gradually and precisely memorized the formula's order. However, she appeared worried as she mumbled it again and again. Do you know about cogitation? When Alger saw Justice nod, he continued, I do not know how much you know about cogitation. Let me describe it once. After consuming the potion, quickly begin cogitation to control your spirituality and energy. Make sure to practice every day to truly grasp the powers of the potion. Dig out the meaning it symbolizes and even more of its mysteries. That way, you can avoid the danger of losing control to the greatest extent. And the meaning of a potion mainly lies in its name, such as Spectator. Klein silently listened to the conversation and had no plans on interrupting. All he did was secretly memorize and study, but when he heard that, he suddenly had a thought. Audrey listened to the hanged man's explanations attentively, and just as she was about to inquire about something more detailed, she suddenly heard the rapping sound on the table. She and Alger turned their heads and looked at the fool. They realized that the mysterious and mighty figure was tapping gently with his fingers. He said in a deep voice, it's not about grasping them, but rather digesting them. It's not about discovery, but rather acting. The name of a potion is not only symbolic, it's also imagery. It is the key to digesting. Audrey was dazed and confused from hearing that. She was not very clear on what Mr. Fool was trying to express. She subconsciously eyed the hanged man for a reaction from the corner of her eyes. She was surprised to see him jolt and freeze. It was as though an ordinary person had heard a loud and sudden clap of thunder. Digesting, acting. Digesting, acting. Digesting, acting, key. Alger repeated it again and again softly as though he had grasped a key concept or had succumbed to a strange curse. After a while, he raised his head and said with a hoarse voice, Thank you, Mr. Fool. Your hint is as valuable as my life. You have enlightened me greatly. Of course, I believe I have yet to fully understand or comprehend it. Klein maintained his mysterious and unfathomable image by saying with a smile, that was an advance payment. In fact, he did not truly understand the exact meaning of what was said. He was just certain that Emperor Roselle was more powerful than the typical Beyonder and stronger than the hanged man. Advance payment. Audrey looked at the hanged man's reaction and knew that the hint from before was precious. As she ruminated over it, she asked, Mr. Fool, what do you wish for us to do? Opposite to her, Alger said with a nod, What matter might you wish to entrust us with? Klein leaned back slightly as he glanced at the two of them before saying in a soft and pleasant voice, Collect Roselle Gustave's secret diary on my behalf, even if it's just one page of it. Chapter 35. Exchange of information. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 35. Exchange of information. Translator. Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios Roselle Gustave's Secret Diary. Emperor Roselle. Indeed, only such matters are worth the concern of a mighty figure like Mr. Fool. Audrey was first taken aback before she realized that she found it nothing surprising. Rumor had it that Emperor Roselle had once seen the blasphemy slate. It was said that the secret cards he created hid the 20.2 paths of the divine. This was something every high sequence beyonder would definitely pay attention to. Diary. That's a diary. Alger frowned slightly as he keenly noticed this tidbit. The item which Roselle Gustave had left behind had been described by Mr. Fool as a diary. How did he know? How did he determine it? Could he know the way to decipher Roselle's cryptic text? Faced with the hanged man's question and having obtained the desired effect, Klein leaned back into his chair and interlocked his hands. He answered in a relaxed manner, "Let us first view it as a diary for now." He did not deny or confirm it. Audrey had heard the children of other nobles mention the matter. However, she had never really learned much of it. With her curiosity piqued, she asked, "It said that Emperor Roselle's, diary was written in a cryptic language or symbols he invented." "Yes," answered Alger simply. "Some people believe that it is a unique set of symbols from mysticism. Others believe that it is a hieroglyph. But up to today, no one has found the correct way of deciphering it. At the very least, that's all I know." With that said, he turned his head at Klein in a bid to get some confirmation or show his suspicions. "They are texts that have been passed down for generations, so are no longer in their original state. According to your line of thought, how can it be deciphered?" Klein maintained his calm as he secretly gave a self-deprecating laugh. As for how to handle the symbols of mysticism, he instantly thought of a ridiculous and funny scene. Dressed in a black dot-pointed hat and long robe, an evil mage pulls up his sleeve to reveal a symbol tattooed on his arm. It was said that this was a symbol with mysterious power left behind by Emperor Roselle. They were written in two blue, large simplified Chinese characters. "Retarded Joker." The corners of Klein's mouth curved up slowly as he found himself in a good mood. After hearing the hanged man's description, Audrey said in a stumped manner, "We can't understand the symbols or the words. Then, how are we to pass the information to you, Mr. Fool? Or are we to mail it somewhere? This is quite an important question. I do not have the means to accept an item secretly." Klein was in no hurry to answer. His repeatedly released his thumbs from his interlocked hands before tapping them back again. Soon, he thought of a solution. "Since I can create a divine palace and table according to my wishes in here, would it be possible to project the content in the minds of others here? I'll give it a try." At that moment, Audrey and Alger saw Mr. Fool slowly sit up amid the thick grayish fog. "Miss Justice, let us give it a try. Imagine a paragraph of text and give it the emotions of writing it with urgency. Yes, pick up the fountain pen beside you and write on the piece of paper." Before Klein finished his sentence, Audrey saw a piece of yellowish-brown goatskin parchment and a dark red fountain pen in front of her. She picked up the fountain pen both curiously and doubtfully. In accordance with the instructions, she imagined a poem Emperor Roselle once wrote. "If winter comes, can spring be far behind?" After scrutinizing the text, she picked up her fountain pen and imbued them with the desire of projecting them out. Klein sensed the emotions and using the fountain pen as a medium, he guided her. The moment Audrey landed her fountain pen, she saw a line appear on the goatskin parchment. "If winter comes, can spring be far behind?" Goddess, how fascinating! Audrey exclaimed in astonishment while feeling rueful. Following that, she looked at Klein with some fear. "Mr. Fool, can you read what I'm thinking?" "No, I'm only guiding you. I simplified the process of writing for you and made it become an imprint. If you did not wish to express it, nothing would appear." Klein placated her with a low tone. "Is that so? Then we can only memorize the symbols or the way the cryptic text looks like. Then, we can present it directly as we wish." Audrey heaved a sigh of relief as she asked in enlightenment. "Yes." Klein answered. "That's not a bad method. Miss Justice, do not doubt your memory. After becoming a spectator, you will receive immense improvement in this aspect. Alger had watched the attempt from the side, fully coming to the realization that the fool was more powerful and mysterious than he imagined. As for his memory, he believed that the next advancement would improve it sufficiently. Regarding this, Audrey nodded in delight. You have delighted me with this reminder. Mr. Hanged Man, do you have any other guidance on spectators? With that said, she looked toward the seat of honor. Mr. Fool, I will work hard to complete your mission. I will do my best to gather more of Emperor Rosel's secret diary. I mentioned before that I'm a person who likes a fair and equal exchange. The advanced payment I gave is only equivalent to 2 pages of the diary for each person. If there are more, I will give additional in return, Klein said calmly, like he was an adult who did not take advantage of children. As for where the additional payment could come from, it was naturally from the newly acquired Emperor Rosel diary pages. This formed a virtuous cycle. You are truly a generous gentleman. Alger fell silent for a few seconds before bowing slightly with his hand by his chest. After the bow, he turned to Justice and said, let me emphasize once more. A spectator will forever be a spectator. I know that many spectators enjoy imagining themselves to be the protagonist or some other character. As a result, they invest a lot of feelings into it, to the point of crying, laughing, raging, and turning sorrowful because of the drama. However, that is not what a spectator should do. While faced with the various dramas of society and figures who knowingly or unknowingly act the role of particular characters, you have to maintain the attitude of being an absolute bystander. Only then can you calmly and objectively observe them. You will discover their habits, their tics from lying, or their scent of nervousness. From those minute clues, you can grasp their true thoughts. Believe me, everyone is different because of their emotions. They will secrete different things and different smells. However, only a real spectator can sniff it out. Once you invest too many of your emotions, your observation will be influenced. Your sensitivity towards the emotions of others will deviate. Audrey listened attentively as her eyes brightened gradually. It sounds really interesting. Klein's heart stirred when he heard that. The spectator potion's requirement when summarized seemed to be an absolutely objective and neutral spectator. In a particular sense, it was equivalent to acting. Acting. Was this the acting which Emperor Rosel was referring to? Then, I will have to act as a seer, and from there, digest the potion bit by bit. Just as Klein was immersing himself in thought, Alger finished explaining the demands he knew of a spectator. He sighed before saying, it seems like there's nothing else. Perhaps we can have a casual chat. We can talk about things happening around us. Perhaps it is something very normal to you, but in the ears of others, it might be a very important clue. Sure. Klein snapped back and nodded slightly. He was already planning to attempt to act as a seer. After all, it did not seem like there were any negative effects from doing so. Then, shall we begin with you, Mr. Hanged Man? Audrey agreed in excitement. Alger thought for a moment before saying, the infamous pirate who calls himself Lieutenant General Deweyville has begun his voyage to explore the eastern end of the Sonia Sea again. Oh. The owner of the Black Tulip returned Audrey with a question after some thought. Yes, Alger replied with a nod. I don't even know who that is. Klein listened silently while he pondered over the news he planned on sharing. It had to be something that did not expose him while also allowing him to gain feedback. Soon, he decided. He maintained his unfathomable image as the fool and caressed the side of the bronze table with his fingers. According to what I know, the secret order has lost an Antigonus family notebook. This news was not only known by the Nighthawks from Tinjin City. The secret order as well as Beyonders with close ties with them similarly knew. An Antigonus family notebook. Alger repeated before smiling with a shake of his head. I'm really curious as to what reaction the Church of the Evernight Goddess will have if they learn of it. Why would he mention the Church of the Evernight Goddess? Klein acutely sensed a problem, but it was not appropriate for him to ask. That would shatter his image as the mysterious and profound fool. At that moment, Audrey asked out of curiosity, "Why are you curious? What sort of special reaction would the goddess's church have?" Alger smiled and said, "The Antigonus family was destroyed by the Church of the Evernight Goddess. I'm not really sure if it happened at the end of the fourth epoch or the early stages of the present epoch." This. Klein's pupils constricted as a chill suddenly swept through him. From the looks of it, the value the Nighthawks have placed on this Antigonus notebook far exceeds my imagination. The reason why they nominated me as a Beyonder, having some contribution and to prevent danger to me are likely negligible reasons, is that they wish for me to raise my spiritual sensitivity to aid them in finding the notebook. This was not kept from me by Captain. He had mentioned it, but I just didn't pay much attention to it. After hearing the hanged man's explanation, Audrey said with deep interest, "I never imagined that such a thing would happen. All right, my turn. Let me think of what I have to share." She cocked her head and held her head up with her hand before chuckling. "Yesterday, my etiquette teacher taught me how to faint elegantly without any faux pas. It's a practical skill used at social events to avoid awkward situations or nasty guys." Heh heh. I was just organizing my thoughts. What I really wanted to say is that ever since the failure of the battle on Balam's eastern shore, the king, premier, and gentlemen are under immense stress. They eagerly wish to change. Chapter 36. A simple question. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 36. A simple question. Translator. Atlas Studios editor. Atlas Studios. While Audrey recalled the conversation between her father and elder brother about the situation, she put in her own words, "They believe that the government structure is too chaotic. Every election, if there is a change of the ruling party, there will be a change of personnel from top to bottom. It makes things a mess and lowers efficiency tremendously. Not only does it cause the battle loss, it also brings great inconvenience to the civilians." Klein knew very well that as there was no example to reference, the Lone Kingdom had yet to evolve into a system that examined public servants. The political situation was still in its preliminary stages, therefore, after every election victory, many so-called positions would be awarded to members and supporters. Emperor Roselle not establishing such an institution in Intis does not match his personality. Could it be that he diverted his focus to other things later in life? When the hanged man, Alger, heard that, he interjected with a soft chuckle. "They believe. Then their beliefs are a little slow. Perhaps they will only feel the itch a year after they get bitten by black mosquitoes." Black mosquitoes were a type of creature that resided in the south of the Lone Kingdom. It was extremely venomous, and its venom made victims have the urge to rip apart their skin. Audrey extended her palm and covered her mouth. Ignoring the hanged man's mockery, she expressed the core information of what she said. "Unfortunately, they are temporarily unable to find a good solution to replace this system." Klein listened carefully and felt that the topic was in the domain of his expertise. He smiled faintly and said, "This is a simple problem. The Foodaholic Empire and the decadent countries that studied the Foodaholic Empire had very advanced experiences of success." Simple. Audrey returned with a question in puzzlement. Although her education did not include politics, she often heard from the discussions of her father, brother, and people around her. She had a sufficient understanding of similar matters. Klein felt as though he had returned to the message boards of yesteryear. "Composed," he said, "an examination, just like an entrance examination for college. Hold an exam that is open to the public. It can be split into 2 rounds or 3 rounds. Use the most objective method to select the elite." But Audrey knew what sort of objection this would entail. Before she had the chance to arrange her thoughts, Klein continued, "After which, use these elites to fill the positions of the cabinet, the county government, the city government, and the various towns. Yes, the positions that are directly handling matters, such as the Secretary of the Cabinet. Different positions should be given different requirements. The second or third rounds can be tested based on locale and region. Professional matters should be left to the professionals. As for political positions such as ministers, governors or mayors, they will be left to the parties that win the election. That is a slice of the pie they deserve. Alger, who lacked interest in such matters, unknowingly turned his head and listened carefully. Audrey frowned slightly as she fell into deep thought. There's no hurry in replacing everyone at once. The cabinet and various agencies in the civil service will be crippled if that happens. You can have an examination every year or every 3 years. They can be gradually replaced. Finally, in light of the kingdom's expansion and the salaried civil servants' resignations that will bring in vacancies, you can systematically allot spots. Klein fully expressed his talent as a keyboard politician. He then faced his palm outwards and said, such a design can bring the kingdom's insightful elites into the government. Regardless of the party in power or who the minister is, the civil service will allow the kingdom to maintain its basic and effective operations. Of course, a side effect was the birth of the undying devil that was bureaucracy. While considering the suggestion, Audrey asked doubtfully, are you implying that even if those ministers become monkeys, the effects would be insignificant? No, Alger interjected suddenly. I believe that monkeys are a better choice than the present ministers. He paused before adding, after all, monkeys only need to eat, sleep, and mate. They would not come up with foolish ideas and insist on brainless projects. Mr. Hanged Man, it sounds you have quite a terrible superior. Klein sat at his seat of honor and shook his head in silent amusement. Audrey ruminated over the suggestion Mr. Fool had offered and after a while, said in surprise, it sounds like it actually might work. It's a very simple but effective solution. She looked at Klein and sincerely marveled, Mr. Fool, you must be an elderly person with outstanding intelligence who is very experienced in life. The corners of Klein's mouth twitched a little as he looked at the Hanged Man and Justice for a few silent seconds. Let us end today's gathering here. If Miss Justice is able to influence her family and effect change on this matter, I can guide Benson ahead of time and give him a chance at becoming a civil servant. On careful thought, Benson was indeed suitable for such a career. However, it is unlikely Justice would take the initiative to do it. This is because the Hanged Man and I can easily find out which noble suggested it and basically guess her identity. Of course, she could do it through a roundabout manner secretly. By your will. Audrey and Alger stood up together. Klein leaned back slightly and severed the connection. He saw Justice and the Hanged Man's illusory and blurry figures instantly shatter and dissipate. Above the grey fog, in the opulent palace where God seemingly lived, he was the only one sitting silently at the head of the bronze table. Klein did not plunge into the grey fog like the other time to leave. This was because his mind was still energetic enough after becoming a Beyonder. The reason why he had ended the Tarot Club early was because he learned the true attitude the Nighthawks had towards the Antigonus notebook. He decided that he had to search for it seriously and not sleep all the way. Doing so would make Dunn Smith suspicious of his activities at home. Furthermore, he had benefited quite a lot this time. Klein sat on the high-back chair at the head of the bronze table. His arms leaned on the armrest as he crossed his fingers while he observed the boundless grey fog carefully. He found the place serene as though no one had stepped into it for 10 million years. When he established the connection to summon the Hanged Man and Justice, he acutely noticed something. That was the fact that as a Beyonder himself, he had the ability to touch another dark red star. Does this mean I can summon one more? Klein recalled the feeling and muttered in confirmation. However, he did not have the urge to make an attempt since he did not know what the identity of the newcomer would be or what sort of attitude they would have. After all, not everyone was like Justice or the Hanged Man who had unique personalities that easily blended in and took whatever they needed. They even seemed willing to conceal matters. If he pulled someone like Dunn Smith, then the mysterious organization he had just established would instantly come under the watch of the church. Bedouin as an evil organization's boss, his future would be worrying. Klein knew that the gray fog was special. He knew it was not something a beyonder at Dunsmith's sequence could see through. But the problem was that since he had the powers of a beyonder, he had to consider the existence of the gods. Klein had chosen to carefully believe that the 7 orthodox gods existed in reality. Of course, he was more tenable to the belief that these gods were just more powerful than high-sequence beyonders. Furthermore, they were under strict limitations. At the very least, ever since the 5th epoch, apart from a few oracles, they have not appeared again. Forcefully pulling people here isn't a good thing. No one would wish to be pulled into mystery for some baffling reason. Let's wait and see how things go in the future. Klein sighed and stood up. He released his spirituality and sensed his body's existence. Then, he began imitating the heavy feeling of rapidly plunging down. The scenes in front of him changed. The gray fog and dark red instantly departed him. Klein felt like he had torn through endless water membranes before ultimately seeing the real world, his room in darkness. This time, he was fully awake and seriously took in the entire experience. Strange. There are some differences between the gray fog and the spirit world. Klein moved his limbs and felt the existence of his body. After he seriously thought through the experience, he shook his head, walked to the desk and pulled open the curtains. Whoosh! The curtains were drawn as sunlight poured in, illuminating the room. As he looked at the street outside the oriel window and the pedestrians going back and forth, Klein took a deep breath and muttered silently, "It's time to go out and work. How should I act as a seer? It cannot be rushed. All I can do is use spirit vision now." Backlund, Empress Borough. Audrey Hall looked at herself in the mirror. She saw her cheeks flushed red with excitement and her eyes, so bright that they would have daunted anyone from looking into them. She did not examine any of this as she hurriedly recalled. She picked up the ruby-studded fountain pen and wrote the formula to the spectator potion on the exquisite goatskin parchment. 80 milliliters of pure water. 5 drops of autumn crocus essence, 13 grams of cow teeth peonal powder. 7 petals of elf flowers. A matured manhal fish's eyeball. 35 milliliters of goat-horned black fish blood. Phew. Audrey heaved a sigh of relief as she read it a few times to confirm that she had not made any mistakes. She had the urge to dance again, but reminded herself to remain restrained. After some thought, she began writing various chemical names around the potion's formula. She then faked the page into complicated and messy chemistry. Yes, as long as one doesn't read it carefully, a person who flips through this randomly will not discover the details I have hidden in here. Excellent. Audrey praised herself and turned her mind towards the acquirement of the materials. I'll first search the few vaults we have. I'll then attempt to exchange for the missing parts with others. If I still can't gather them all, I can only seek help from the hanged man or the fool. What can I offer as payment? After some thought, Audrey closed the notebook and placed it on a tiny bookshelf. Following that, she briskly walked to the door and pulled it open. A golden retriever was sitting obediently outside. The corners of Audrey's mouth curled as she revealed a radiant smile. "Susie, you completed the mission perfectly." In the serialized stories on the newspapers, detectives would often have a capable assistant. I think there should be a huge dog supporting a real spectator. In an underground basement lit only by a flickering candle, Alger Wilson raised his palm and looked at it carefully. After a long while, he let out a sigh. It's still that miraculous. I was unable to figure out any specific details at all. Despite having made sufficient preparations, he failed to understand how the fool had completed the summoning. He moved his gaze down and looked at the goatskin parchment on the table in front of him. At the title head of the yellowish-brown parchment, there was a Hermes sentence written in dark blue ink. 7. Seafarer. Chapter 37. The Club. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 37. The Club Translator. Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios. Under the scorching afternoon sun, Klein left his house. Since he had to walk all the way from Iron Cross Street to Welch's place, he wore a linen shirt instead of his formal attire of top hat and leather boots. He wore a matching brown coat, a round felt hat and a pair of old leather shoes. That way, he did not need to worry that the stench of his sweat would contaminate the rather expensive suit. As he went down Daffodil Street, he strolled toward Iron Cross Street. When he passed by the square around the corner, he subconsciously took a glance. The tents had already vanished. The circus troupe from before had left after finishing their performance. Klein originally imagined the animal trainer who had helped him tell his fortune to be a hidden expert. He believed she had purposely appeared to guide him after discovering something unique about him and that she would meet him and provide hints for the future. However, none of that happened. She left for the next stop in the tour with the circus troupe. How can there be so many cliched tropes? Klein shook his head while grimacing a smile. He turned toward Iron Cross Street. Iron Cross Street was not characterized by just a single street. Like its name suggested, it was formed by two roads that crossed each other. With the intersection at its core, it was split into Left Street, Right Street, Upper Street, and Lower Street. Klein, Benson, and Melissa previously lived on Lower Street. However, the residents living at his former apartment and the surrounding area did not think of the area as Lower Street. Instead, they created the term Middle Street. By doing so, they made a clear difference between those staying there and the poor who lived 200 meters down the road. There, a bedroom was occupied by 5 or 6 people, and sometimes even up to 10. Klein walked along the periphery of Left Street as he let his mind wander. He recalled the Antigonus family's notebook and how it was missing. He thought of its importance to the Nighthawks and thought of the deaths that resulted from it. His heart slowly turned heavy as his face turned ashen. At that moment, a familiar voice sounded. "Lad." "Oh." Klein turned his head curiously and found himself by Smyron Bakery's entrance. Mrs. Wendy with a head of gray hair was greeting him with a wave and a warm smile. "You don't look very happy," Wendy asked genially. Klein rubbed his face and said, "A little." "Regardless of your worries, tomorrow will always come," said Mrs. Wendy with a smile. "Here, try out my newly created sweet iced tea. I'm not sure if it suits the palate of the locals." "Locals? Aren't you one, Mrs. Smyron?" Klein shook his head in amusement. "Trying out something means it's free, right?" Wendy Smyron raised her chin a little and said, "You guessed right. I'm actually a Southerner. I came to Tianjin with my husband, but that was more than 40 years ago." "Heh heh, back then, Benson was not born yet. Even your parents did not know each other. I have always been a little unaccustomed to the dietary preferences of Northerners and I'm always missing my hometown's food. I miss pork sausages, potato bread, roasted pancakes, vegetables fried in lard, and roasted meat with specialty sauces. Oh, and I also miss sweet iced tea." Klein suffused a smile when he heard that. "Mrs. Smyron, this sure is a topic that makes me hungry. But I feel a lot better. Thank you very much. Delicacies can always cure sorrow." Wendy handed him a cup of brownish-red liquid. "This is sweet iced tea I made according to my memories. Try it and tell me if it's nice." After thanking her, Klein took a sip and found it resembling iced red tea from Earth. However, it was not as stimulating. The taste of tea was stronger and felt more refreshing. It instantly expelled the heat brought by the burning sun. "It's excellent," he marveled. "That puts me at ease." Wendy smiled with squinted eyes as she watched him finish the cup of tea in a genial manner. After chatting with Mrs. Smyron about his moving, Klein returned to the street he was most familiar with. There were far fewer street-side hawkers in the afternoon. They gathered again after 5:30. The ones that stayed behind looked drowsy and listless. The moment he entered the area, Klein's heart suddenly felt overwhelmed by darkness. His heart felt heavy, down, and gloomy for an inexplicable reason. What's happening? He sharply sensed something wrong about himself. He immediately stopped and observed his surroundings, but did not see anything strange. After some thought, Klein raised his hand and tapped his glabella like he was thinking. The extent of his vision immediately transformed. The auras of the hawkers and pedestrians all appeared. Before Klein could observe the colors of their health, his attention was pulled away by the colors that represented gloominess. He was unable to determine the exact thoughts of the observed, but the despondent, apathetic, and gloomy impression was deeply carved into his heart. As he surveyed the area, he realized that even the sun could not disperse those dark colors. It was a sense of gloom that tainted them from years of repression. Upon seeing this, Klein instantly understood the reason. Just as old Neil said, activating his spirit vision easily pulled him into unfamiliar environments and made him feel discomfort. It was also easy for himself to be affected by the emotions of others. A similar principle could be used on an ability like perception. This was an ability he obtained without additional practice after becoming a seer. It was a passive sense that could not be declined. It allowed him to directly sense the existence of anything abnormal. There was bound to be a level of interaction when perceiving things, therefore, in the beyonder eyes of someone like a spirit medium, the intensity of everyone's perception is clear. It is like a fire in the night. Therefore, people with high perceptivity were naturally affected by the intense atmosphere of anything abnormal. It could only be repeatedly practiced to grasp, control, and adapt to such outcomes. Such a repressed color is probably formed over extended periods of time, right? Klein sighed as he shook his head, feeling somewhat affected. He tapped his glabella twice again and tried hard to converge his spirituality. Tap. 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 Klein walked toward the apartment and sensed for any abnormal existences or tiny connections while also searching for the Antigonus family's notebook which he had hidden. The streets were the same as usual. There was filthy water and trash on the streets. It only cleared up when he reached the apartment's entrance. Klein pushed open the half-closed door and circled the first floor in the darkness that the sunlight could not reach. The wooden stairs creaked constantly as he went up them. The second floor was as dim as always. Klein released his perception and looked into the darkness. However, not only did he fail to discover any clues regarding his notebook, he even failed to see any invisible spiritual bodies. If it's so easy to encounter them, most ordinary people would not have already sensed the existence of extraordinary matters. Klein sighed in reflection. He had already understood that most spirits did not exist in the form of spiritual bodies, but in the form of spirituality. Only a spirit medium could effectively communicate with them. After circling the third floor once, Klein left the apartment and retraced his memory's footsteps towards Welch's place. He walked for a full hour but did not discover anything along the way. Standing outside the garden bungalow, Klein looked at the building through the locked iron gates and mumbled to himself, "There's no need for me to search Welch's place, right? Captain and Madame Daly must have done a carpet search of the place. Besides, I don't have the key. They can't expect me to climb the walls, right? I'll try another path tomorrow. I've walked so much today, but there are no step counter rankings." While lampooning, Klein returned to the nearby district. He planned on taking a public carriage to Blackthorn Security Company to retrieve his daily allocation of 30 bullets. He needed to make use of his time and practice. A seer's lack of quick and effective offensive means could only be made up with his revolver and cane. The district around Welch's place was relatively clean. Shops with clean and bright windows lined the two sides of the street. At the turn of the street, Klein was just about to seek out the carriage stop when his gaze swept past a few signboards on the second floor. Harrod's Department Store. Military Veterans Mess. Divination Club. Divination Club. Klein silently repeated the name and recalled that he had to act as a seer. Yes, I should take a look. And seek out new ideas. Amid his mixed thoughts, Klein went across the street and went to the second floor. He entered the main foyer to see a beautiful female attendant. The woman with coiled brownish-yellow hair sized up Klein before saying with a smile, "Sir, do you wish to have your fortune told, or do you wish to join our club?" "What are the conditions for entry?" asked Klein casually. The woman explained with great familiarity, "Fill in your particulars and pay an annual membership fee. The first year is £5 and subsequent years will be £1 a year. Don't worry, we are not like political or business clubs which allow entry through recommendations from formal members. Members can freely use the club's meeting room and various divination rooms and tools. They can enjoy the coffee and tea we provide and read the newspapers and magazines we subscribe for free. They can buy lunch, dinner, and alcoholic beverages at cost price, as well as education materials and materials needed for divination. In addition, we invite at least one famous fortune teller to lecture every month to answer any questions. Most importantly, you can find a bunch of friends with the same hobbies and have an exchange with them. It sounds pretty good, but I do not have the money." Klein gave a self-deprecating smile before asking, "Then what if I want my fortune told?" Chapter 38. Novice Hobbyist. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 38. Novice Hobbyist. Translator. Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios. Upon hearing Klein's question, the beautiful lady with elegantly tied-up brownish-yellow hair appeared to lose her patience. However, she maintained her smile and said, "Our members are free to do divination for others in the club. They also have their prices and we take a very tiny cut as a fee. If you wish to have your fortune told, you can take a look at this album. It has introductions and rates of the members who are willing to do divination for others. However, it's Monday afternoon, so most of our members are busy at work. We only have 5 here today." As she introduced the club, she invited Klein to have a seat on the sofa beside a window in the reception hall. Then, she flipped through the album and pointed out the present club members. Hannes Vincent. Famous Tianjin fortune teller. The club's resident mentor. Good at various forms of divination. He charges 4 solely each time. It's really expensive. That's enough to feed Benson, Melissa, and me to 2 sumptuous dinners. Klein clicked his tongue silently and did not reply. When the woman saw this, she continued flipping the page and introducing one member after another. And the final one, Glassy. A member who joined the club this year. He is skilled in tarot divination. He charges 2 pence each time. Sir, who do you plan on choosing? Klein did not stand on ceremony and answered, Mr. Glassy. The female attendant fell silent for 2 seconds before saying, Sir, I have to remind you that Mr. Glassy is only considered a novice. I understand. I will be responsible for my own decision. Klein nodded with a smile. Then please follow me. The woman stood up and led Klein through a door beside the reception hall. It was not a very long corridor and an open meeting room was situated at its end. There was enough sunlight and it was equipped with tables and chairs. There were newspapers, magazines, and paper cards. A faint coffee aroma drifted out. About 2 rooms from the meeting room, the attendant gestured for Klein to stop. She sped up her pace and entered the room. She shouted gently, Mr. Glassy, someone wishes for your divination. Me. A voice filled with surprise and doubt immediately sounded. Following that, there was the sound of a chair moving. Yes, which divination room would you like to use? Replied the lady without any emotion. Topaz room. I like Topaz. Glassy appeared by the meeting room's door and looked curiously at Klein who was waiting not far away. He was a man in his 30s, his skin was slightly dark and his pupils were a dark green shade. Under his light, yellow, and soft hair, he was dressed in a white shirt and black vest. A monocle hung from his chest and he seemed to have a good disposition. The attendant did not say anything further as she opened the door to the topaz room which was next to the meeting room. The curtains inside were tightly shut, making it dim. It appeared that only by doing so would one gain revelations from the gods and spirits to obtain an accurate divination outcome. Hello there. I'm Glassy. I never expected you to choose me for your divination. Glassy gave a gentleman's bow, briskly stepped into the room, and sat behind a long table. Frankly, I'm only attempting divination for others. I do not have much experience. For now, I'm not a good fortune teller. You still have a chance for regret. After Klein returned the bow, he entered and closed the door behind him. By the light seeping through the curtains, he said with a smile, "You are a really honest man, but I'm someone who is very firm on his choices. Please have a seat." Glassy pointed at the seat in front of him and thought for a few seconds. Divination is my hobby. Heh heh. In life, one often receives guidance from the divine, but the ordinary person is unable to accurately understand the meaning. This is the reason why divination exists and also why I joined this club. In this aspect, I still lack confidence. Let's make the divination that follows an exchange, a free exchange. How do you like my suggestion? I'll cover the fees the club requires. It's just a quarter pence. Klein did not agree or shake his head. Instead, he smiled. From the looks of it, you have a pretty well paying and decent job. While he said so, he leaned his body forward slightly. He held his forehead with his right fist and tapped at it twice. But that does not enhance the accuracy of my divination, answered Glassy humorously. Does your head hurt? Do you want to divine problems regarding health? A little. I wish to divine where an item is. Klein had already thought of an excuse as he slowly leaned back. In his eyes, Glassy's aura clearly presented itself. The orange colors by his lungs were dark and sparse. They even influenced the brightness in other areas. This is not a symptom of exhaustion. Klein nodded in an indiscernible manner. Are you searching for a lost item? Glassy thought for a few seconds before saying, then let's do a simple determination. He pushed the neatly stacked tarot cards on the black table toward Klein. Calm down. Think of that item and ask yourself, can it still be found? While doing so, shuffle and cut the deck. All right. Klein actually did not remember what the ancient notebook looked like. All he could do was repeat the question to himself. Can the Antigonus family's notebook still be found? While he repeated the thought, he skillfully shuffled and cut the deck. Glassy picked the topmost card and pushed it in front of Klein. The card was facing down horizontally. Turn it clockwise until it sits vertical. Then flip it open. If the card is inverted, which means the picture on the card is facing away from you, it indicates that the item cannot be found. If the card is upright, then we can continue the divination and seek its actual location. Klein followed his instructions and turned the horizontal card vertical. He clasped the end of the tarot card and flipped it over. It was an inverted card. What a pity. Glassy sighed. Klein did not respond because his attention was focused on the tarot card in front of him. The inverted card's picture was dressed in gorgeous clothes and splendid headdress, the Fool. It's the Fool again. It can't be so coincidental, right? According to the Hanged Man and Old Neil, divination is the outcome of the communication of spirituality in the spirit world with a higher dimensional me. Tarot cards are only a convenient tool to read what the truth symbolizes. In theory, using any divination item doesn't matter as it doesn't affect the outcome. Klein frowned as he thought for a moment. Can it be divined whether the item is already in the hands of others? Of course. Follow the same procedure and do it again. Glassy nodded with rich interest. Klein shuffled and cut the deck while thinking of his question. He drew a card and placed it horizontally before turning it vertical clockwise. He finished all the preparations with a serious expression. Taking a deep breath, Klein reached out his hand and flipped over the tarot card. Please do not be the fool again. While praying, he suddenly relaxed because the card was that of the star and it was inverted. From the looks of it, the item has not been taken by others yet, interpreted Glassy with a smile. Klein nodded and raised his right hand. He tapped his glabella, looking as though he was deep in thought. Then, he took out 2 pennies with a dark copper luster from his pocket and pushed it towards Glassy. Didn't I say it was free? Glassy said with a frown. Klein laughed as he got up. This is the respect divination deserves. All right, thank you for your generosity. Glassy stood up and reached out his hand. After shaking his hand, Klein took 2 steps back and turned around. He walked to the door and twisted the doorknob. Just as he was about to leave, he suddenly turned his head and made a terse sound. Mr. Glassy, I suggest that you see a doctor as soon as possible. Focus on your lungs. Why? Asked Glassy in surprise. Are you cursing me because you aren't pleased with the divination results? Klein thought for a moment before saying, it's a symptom based on the color of your face. Well. Your glabella seems dark, glabella seems dark. It was the first time Glassy was hearing such a description. Klein did not explain further as he walked out the room with a smile. He closed the wooden door behind him. Is he an unlicensed doctor or a herbalist? Glassy shook his head, amused. He then picked up his monocle for divination. On careful look, he realized his glabella was indeed dark. But this was a problem of the environment. In the darkness due to the closed curtains, not only was his glabella dark, his entire face was shrouded in darkness. It's not a very likable joke. Glassy muttered. He worriedly divined his own health to make sure that everything was all right. After leaving the divination club, Klein had an additional plan for the future. It was to save as much money as possible to pay the annual fee to become a member of the club. After which, he could begin acting as a seer. As for why he did not choose to do it independently, it was because he temporarily lacked the resources and channels. He could not bring himself to stand on the streets as a hawker since he cared for his reputation. A few minutes later, the public carriage arrived. He spent 2 pence and reached Zutland Street, which was not very far off. He pushed open the door to Blackthorn Security Company but did not see the familiar brown-haired girl. He only saw the black-haired, green-eyed Leonard Mitchell with his poetic bearing behind the reception counter. Good afternoon. Where's Roseanne? Klein asked after taking off his hat and bowing. Leonard smiled and pointed at the partition. It's her shift tonight at the armory. Without waiting for Klein to ask another question, Leonard said as though he was pondering over a matter, Klein, I have a question that has always puzzled me. What is it? Klein was puzzled. Leonard stood up and smilingly said with a relaxed tone, why did Welch and Nyack commit suicide on the spot while you returned home? It likely has to do with how the unknown existence made me take the Antigonus family's notebook away to hide it, answered Klein with the official surmise. Leonard paced around before turning to look straight into Klein's eyes. If your suicide was meant to silence you and wipe out any clues, why weren't you made to destroy the notebook there and then? Chapter 39. Interesting trick. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 39. Interesting trick. Translator. Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios. In fact, I do not know if the notebook is destroyed or hidden. But by using backward reasoning, if it is to be destroyed, it could have been done on the spot. There was no need for me to take it away to carry out the destruction. Upon hearing Leonard's question, Klein instantly went into keyboard detective mode and said with a sigh, perhaps when Welch, Naya, and I made contact with the unknown existence, it enjoyed the sacrifice of life or wished for similar situations to continue. With the suicide definitely easily discoverable, I was made to take away the notebook to hide it so as to prepare for the existence's second round of entertainment. However, some mishap happened during the process and I failed to succeed in my suicide. This was a reason guess Klein made from his consumption of novels, movies, and TV dramas which involved cult sacrifices. As for the mishap that happened midway, he knew very well that it was due to the unexpected variable of him being a transmigrator. Quite a good explanation, but I believe there might be other possibilities. Welch's and Naya's suicide sacrifice might have made it possible for the unknown existence to descend on this world. Then, that notebook is a vessel or a breeding ground for evil. It made you take it away to hide it, worried that we would destroy it if we discovered its birth, before it became strong. Leonard Mitchell suggested another possibility. Having said that, he stared into Klein's eyes and smiled slightly. Of course, perhaps the notebook has been destroyed. The goal is to hide its content, to conceal the vessel or the brooding of evil. That way, there is a sufficient reason for your failed suicide. What does he mean? Is he suspecting me? Is he suspecting that the original Klein's body is a vessel or used for the brooding of evil? No, what he's being a vessel for is a transmigrator. Actually, brooding isn't a correct term. Klein was taken aback. While he secretly criticized the idea, he weighed his words. I will not try to defend myself since I've lost memories from that period. Be it Captain or Madame Daly, they have already confirmed that I'm fine. Your joke isn't funny. I'm only considering a possibility. It does not eliminate the blow the unknown existence encountered and it descended which caused your suicide to fail. We believe that the goddess will ultimately bless us. Leonard laughed as he changed the subject. Did you discover anything in the afternoon? After the conversation and the previous encounters, Klein was very wary of Leonard. He answered in a composed manner, no. I plan on trying a different route tomorrow afternoon. He pointed to the partition and said, I'll need to head to the armory to draw the bullets. The shooting club opened to 9 at night. After all, its availability increased only after many of its members got off work. May Goddess bless you. Leonard smiled as he gestured the sign of the crimson moon on his chest. He watched Klein pass through the partition and listened to his footsteps down the stairs. Leonard's smile gradually vanished as a look of doubt appeared in his green eyes. He whispered something with a displeased tone. Down the stairs, Klein followed the gas lamp-illuminated corridor to the armory and archives. The iron door was open and the brown-haired Roseanne was standing in front of the table. She was chatting with a top hat-wearing middle-aged man with a thick black beard. Good afternoon, no. Good evening. It's always night here. Klein, I heard from old Neil that you have become a beyonder. It's called seer. Roseanne turned her head and deluged him with her questions. She did not hide her curiosity and concern. Klein nodded with a smile. Good afternoon, Miss Roseanne. It's indeed always night here, but it makes one feel a sense of serenity. The description you gave wasn't accurate enough. It should be said that the sequence potion I consumed has the name Seer. You still chose to become a beyonder after all. Roseanne said with a sigh as she fell into a deep thought. Klein looked at the middle-aged man beside her and asked politely, You are another Nighthawk member or one of the other 2 civilian staff I have not met? Roseanne puckered her lips and said, Brett. Our colleague. He wishes to change slots with me to free up the night after tomorrow. He plans on going to the theater in the North District with his wife to watch The Prideful One. It's to celebrate their 15th-year wedding anniversary. He's truly a romantic gentleman. Brett smiled as he extended his hand and said, with Miss Roseanne around, there's nothing that requires repeating. Hello, Klein. I never expected you to become a beyonder so quickly. As for me, I might never have the courage. Perhaps it's as the saying goes, the ignorant knows no fear, Klein said in a self-deprecating manner as he extended his hand to shake Brett's. Me not having courage is not something bad, said Brett with a shake of his head. A beyonder once told me before his death to never probe the strange and dangerous matters. The less you know, the longer you live. At that moment, Roseanne interjected, Klein, there's no need to mind it. I heard from old Neil that as a seer, you are used as support. It's relatively safe as long as you do not attempt to communicate with unknown existences. Why are you dressed in such clothes? It's so unbecoming of a gentleman. What are you here for? I'm here to draw my 30 bullets. Klein did not reply to Roseanne's first question. He believed that the lady would quickly forget the matter. All right. Roseanne pointed at the table and said, Brett, it's all yours. You should know where the keys and bullets are. Oh, old Neil really is petty. He did not even leave his hand-ground coffee behind. He promised me that I could drink my fill today. She prattled on as Klein received the bullets. The duo left together and went their separate ways at Zutland Street. One took a public carriage home while the other walked into the shooting club. Bang! 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 Klein repeated the process, gripping the gun, raising his arms, shooting, releasing the cylinder, ejecting the empty shells, and stuffing in rounds, again and again. He became familiar with the process and built it into his muscle memory. Of course, he had a few breaks in between to review and correct the process. After finishing his practice, Klein used the grounds to do various exercises like push-ups. He worked hard to train his body to improve his physique. Once everything was over, he sat in an untracked carriage home. Only then he realized it was nearing 7 and the sky was already dark. Just as Klein was planning to head to the market or streets to buy the ingredients for dinner, the door opened. Melissa had returned with her stationery-filled bag. Apart from that, she carried quite a lot of groceries. That I thought you and Benson would be home rather late. This morning, I took out one solely from the place you hide the money. Upon seeing her brother's questioning look, Melissa explained in her usual serious manner. Since you took the money, why didn't you take the public carriage to school? Klein had been reminded of the matter from the morning. Melissa said with a frown, why should I take a public carriage? It costs 4 pence to get to school. A return trip means 8 pence. Counting Benson and you, we will be spending 20.4 pence on transportation daily. That's a whole solely. In a week, yes, without counting Sunday, that's still 12 pence. It's almost equal to our rent. Stop, stop, stop. Don't flaunt your mathematical prowess. Klein lowered his palm in an amused manner. Melissa first stopped before adding, it's pretty good walking to school. Our teacher said that everyone should exercise frequently. Besides, I can pick some damaged components on the way. Klein chuckled and said, then let's do the math again. The public carriage costs 12 solely. The rent is 12 solely and 3 pence. It's a total of £1 for solely and 3 pence. Using Benson's salary is enough to pay for it and there will be quite a bit of change left. Yes, he has received last week's salary. As for me, I can still earn £1.10 solely every week. Even if we eat meat every day while counting expenses like gas, charcoal, wood, and condiments, we would still have some left if we are frugal with lunch. We can even subscribe to the morning papers for just 1 penny. In 2 months, when I make up for the advanced payment, I can save money for both you and Benson. We can have new clothes. But we have to think of the possible accidents. Melissa stayed firm on her point. Klein smiled at her and said, then, we can eat less meat. Don't you find spending 100 minutes on the road a waste of time? You could use that time to read more and think over problems and improve your results. That way, Melissa, you will be graduate with excellent grades. You will be able to find a job with a pretty good salary. When that happens, what is there to worry about? He fully displayed his experience gained from debating with people on message boards and finally convinced Melissa. She agreed to take the public carriage to school. Phew, I've finally suckered her into doing it. No, how can I call it suckering? This is called convincing. Klein lampooned before taking over the groceries that Melissa had bought. He said with a sigh, remember to buy beef or meat like mutton and chicken. Eat until you're full and enjoy yourself. Only then will you be equipped with a healthy body and a clever brain to match the demanding requirements needed for your studies. Just mentioning it makes me salivate. Melissa puckered her lips and after a few seconds of silence, said, all right. The next morning, after ensuring that Melissa took a public carriage, Klein and Benson separated and went to their respective companies. The moment Klein stepped into the door, he saw old Neil and Roseanne chatting by the reception desk. The former was still in his classic black robe, without any concern for the gazes of others. The latter had changed into a casual cream-colored dress. Good morning, Mr. Neil, Miss Roseanne, greeted Klein as he took off his hat. Old Neil gave him a mischievous look. Good morning, you did not hear anything you shouldn't have heard last night, right? No, I slept very well. Klein was also quite puzzled over that. He could only put it down to his inadequate perception. Don't mind that. Actually, it's not that easily heard. Old Neil pointed to the partition and said, go to the armory. We will continue out mysticism lessons this morning. Klein nodded and followed old Neil down the stairs and arrived at the armory to replace Brett who had been on duty the entire night. What will we be learning today? Asked Klein curiously. Old Neil dragged out his response and said, the complicated and basic knowledge. But before that, let me teach you an interesting trick. He pointed at the silver chain on his wrist. There was a pure moonstone hanging from the chain. Chapter 40. Mysticism Curriculum. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 40. Mysticism Curriculum Translator. Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios, an interesting trick. Klein asked out of extreme curiosity. Old Neil chuckled and said, I'll complete my patrol of the armory, storeroom, and archives. Use the 2 cups on the table to make 2 cups of coffee. In one of the cups, put something unpleasant. As for what it is, you can decide for yourself. Use your imagination. The only request from me is to not waste too much coffee powder. Those are coffee beans grown on the Fainapotter Plateau and hand ground by me. All right. Although Klein was unsure what old Neil was up to, he happily agreed to it. He watched him open the iron gates to the armory with a copper key and then heard the echoing footsteps inside. Slowly, he settled the cups down and confirmed that there was still hot water in the kettle. He removed the silver tin can's lid and using a tiny spoon with a metallic sheen, Klein scooped a spoonful of rich aromatic coffee powder into each of the 2 cups. Then, he poured in the hot water and stirred it. As a transmigrator who came from an era abundant in resources, he was no stranger to coffee. However, it was only limited to instant coffee. After finishing the task, Klein pondered for a moment and sat down. He crossed his right leg and took some of the mud which had stained the bottom of his leather boots and placed it in the left cup. Then, he carefully stirred it again until the colors and smells of the 2 cups of coffee were practically indistinguishable. A few minutes later, old Neil walked out the armory while swinging his keys. He then closed the iron gates with a clang. Are you done? He turned his slightly turbid dark red eyes over and looked at Klein across the table. Yes, replied Klein with a nod. Old Neil chuckled and removed the silver chain around his wrist and sat down. His expression quickly turned serene. He held out his chain holding left hand and allowed it to hang over the coffee cup to his right. The moonstone nearly touched the liquid. Amid the relaxing calmness, the moonstone trembled suddenly. It began spinning the chain in a counterclockwise manner. This cup is the one with the unpleasant thing, said old Neil surely. Without waiting for Klein to confirm, he put away the silver chain and picked up the other cup of coffee and took a sip. Do you like bitter coffee? I'm used to having a tablespoon of sugar and a tablespoon of milk. Klein did not reply but instead asked with his interest piqued, your divination sure is accurate. Was it because of the moonstone? That was moonstone, right? This is known as pendulum dowsing in divination. It's also called spirit dowsing. It relies on your own astral projection's connection with the spirit world and space to communicate with spiritual intelligence through the aid of natural materials such as crystals, gems, or special metals. The good and bad of things can be divined. Let's talk about the 2 cups of coffee. A counterclockwise motion implies bad, while a clockwise motion is good. If it doesn't move, it's neither good or bad. You can write the statement on a piece of paper. Take note, it's a statement and not a question. Old Neil put down the cup of coffee and explained in detail. Klein asked as though he was thinking, does that mean one should use questioning sentences? Yes, you cannot use, is so and so willing to be my fiancé, but you should instead use, so and so is willing to be my fiancé. Write it on a piece of paper and place it on the desk. Then use your dominant hand to hold the pendulum chain. Take note, use your dominant hand, said old Neil with a chuckle. When doing so, keep your arms straight. Adjust the chain's length and make the moonstone hang just above the piece of paper to the point of almost touching what we wrote. Then, close your eyes and repeat the sentence 7 times in your mind. Open your eyes when you are done and see if the spirit pendulum turns or not. If it doesn't, close your eyes again and repeat the process until it moves. Klein nodded slightly and asked, counterclockwise means no, and clockwise means yes. It can also be interpreted as success or failure, corrected old Neil. He taught Klein the other usages and details of spirit pendulum divination. Klein pondered over the matter and discovered that it was a very useful divination trick. For instance, he could quickly use it in an unfamiliar environment to determine if the food he was offered was poisonous or not. He did not need any additional knowledge of field biology. Of course, such divination methods were overly simple. The answers he could receive were limited to 2 or 3. There was no way for deeper investigation or interpretation. For example, although something could be harmful to the body, it could become very beneficial after some processing. An example was certain foods. They were indeed damaging to the body, but nothing serious. If one was on the brink of starving, eating it would not be a huge problem. These were things that spirit dowsing could not determine. I will have to quickly save money to buy crystals or pure silver to create a spirit pendulum. Klein sighed. Old Neil looked at him in puzzlement. You can apply for one directly. This is standard issue for beyonders, especially beyonders like us who take on a support role. There's still a topaz and pure silver spirit pendulum in the armory. But I'm still not a formal member of the team. Klein's heart palpitated in excitement, but he felt a little hesitant. Old Neil chuckled and said, for beyonders, regardless of whether they are formal members or not, they have to be provided with conveniences in other areas since there's no pay rise. Maybe the word perk is more suitable. I'll apply with Captain later. Klein clenched his fists secretly as he made up his mind. How was he to know if Captain would approve his request without trying? All right, said old Neil with a smile. We can officially begin our mysticism curriculum. The basics consist of symbolism. Do you know what symbolism means? Klein recalled the bits and pieces he had heard and the things he had seen and heard from his spirit world and the gray fog. He deliberated and said, regardless of the spirit world or the illusory stellar space, as well as the unknown realms, they are beyond our sensory world. It's not something that can be accurately described by the information our ears, nose, and eyes obtain. What we obtain are simply indescribable experiences and direct revelations. They also appear as abstract characters or pictorial symbols. These symbols represent different items and different meanings. Very accurate. As expected of a seer. Old Neil nodded solemnly. Only by grasping the ability to interpret the symbols can you really take the next step into the world of mysticism. Yes, the pictures on tarot cards and each of the elements in the pictures are symbols. They are man-made symbols that help us understand and interpret primordial revelations. He pulled out a piece of paper and picked up a fountain pen beside him. He drew a short curve. Following that, he added a few vertical lines beneath the curve. He looked up at Klein and asked, "Do you know what this symbol represents?" Klein looked at it for quite a while before saying hesitatingly, "Eyelashes." Old Neil exhaled. "This is the symbol of the bumper harvest constellation. This is the thunderous constellation, and this is the frost constellation." He casually drew a few more symbols. As Klein memorized them, he could not help but comment, "The names of these constellations are really especially unsophisticated." Yes, unsophisticated. How tacky and primordial. Old Neil revealed a smile. Emperor Roselle thought the same back then. He always had the intention of changing the constellation names to things like Virgo, Cancer, and Scorpio. Unfortunately, he did not have the strength to go against tradition. At the very least, these constellations' old names and the corresponding dates they represent guide farming and harvests. I have to say that Emperor Roselle sure is a person with ideas. Klein was at a loss for words. Yes, Emperor Roselle was likely a decent person when he was alive. Old Neil was unable to understand Klein's humor as he continued explaining the various basic symbols, such as the various constellations, the sun, the crimson moon, the brown star, the red star, and the blue star. While talking about these, he would teach Klein how to draw the divination astrolabe and indicate what things to pay attention to. He also taught the materials and creation of a crystal ball, and the choice of incantations. The teachings overwhelmed Klein. If not for his discovery that the seer potion had improved his memory slightly, he would have long asked Old Neil to stop to aid his digesting of the information. That's all for today's mysticism class. Think over it yourself and ask me if you have any questions. Old Neil took out a gold pocket watch and opened it with a snap to check the time. Do not forget to read the historical documents I prepared for you. To be frank, I feel fear seeing them. All right. Klein took the pieces of paper that were sketched with symbols by Old Neil. He quickly went through the mysticism knowledge he learned today to prevent himself from forgetting it. Old Neil took a sip of a newly brewed cup of coffee and said, "Memory itself won't do. You have to use if often. That way, you can make the knowledge instinctual. Also, cogitation has to be carried on every day. Only more practice and usage will allow you to grasp the power of the potion, digging into the mysteries it hides away and removing its unpleasant effects." With this raised, Klein recalled acting in the divination club. He probed, "My potion's abilities are related to divination. Practicing by myself will not do. I need to make contact with lots of people and divine for them to quickly grasp it. I plan on joining the divination club after having some spare cash, the one on House Street in Northborough, to become a real seer." This was not something he could hide from the Nighthawks in the future. It was better to prepare them. "Your idea is very similar to Daly's. She has always clamored to be a real spirit medium." Old Neil shook his head and laughed. "But why must you wait till you have spare cash? You can apply to Dunn and get him to approve of the expenses. Organizations like a divination club might also have cultists or members of evil organizations in them. As a civilian staff member of the Nighthawks and a standard Beyonder, your membership makes it easy for us to monitor them. It's part of the job. We would regularly monitor these places, but as we lack manpower, we can't keep watch on them for long. Now, it can be handled to you. I can do that." As he looked at Old Neil's serious expression, Klein was dumbfounded. "This is making an expense claim for private matters. I know nothing about such matters. Indeed, I'm just a keyboard warrior. You wish to use your own money to do this. Old Neil smiled as he added when he saw Klein's face. Klein immediately shook his head as he answered firmly, I plan on reporting it to Captain. Old Neil nodded in satisfaction and looked at the cup of coffee with the unpleasant thing inside. It had not been poured away. What did you put in there? Klein smiled embarrassingly. It's just some dirt underneath my boots. Its color and your coffee powder looks almost the same. Old Neil was taken aback as he suddenly clasped his mouth and roared, why aren't you pouring it away yet?